So let's move from Canada to Mexico, because they've got a roster that a lot of folks are going to be saying, hey, what are the familiar names? The 31-man preliminary list dropping on Friday for the Copa America. Of course, going to have to narrow it down to 26 or 23. But this is a really young team for Jimmy Lozano. 10 players under the age or 23 or younger. Again, this was the second oldest team at the last World Cup, so it gives you an idea. The big name's gone: Memo Ochoa, Chucky Lozano, Henry Martin. I guess we'll throw Raul Jimenez in there because he's a big name as well, signaling a generational shift for Mexico ahead of their Copa America, where they're going to be in there with Group B: Jamaica, Venezuela, Ecuador, and then they got Bolivia, Uruguay, and Brazil in some games to prepare. All right, Herc, let's dive into the timing of this generational shift. Is now the moment? Really?
Better late than never, right? Because the reality is the moment should have been in Qatar during the World Cup, the 2022 World Cup. And what I mean by that is, instead of taking a Funes Mori who's older than 30, who only played 4 minutes for you against Saudi Arabia, maybe you take a Santi Jimenez who can maybe play those 4 minutes, if not more, and you're grooming him for the next generation, the next tournament, his future. Maybe you don't take a 40-plus-year-old third goalkeeper and you take a Luis Malagon, and maybe he gets that international roce, the if you will, sharpening of the irons with those of him or like-minded of him, and that goes one way. But the reality is you're late on this. And if you didn't do it in the World Cup in 2022, you should have done it just after that, when it was Diego Coca. You didn't do it there either. So now you don't do it at the Gold Cup. You have to do it now. And I guess it's a generational change, but it really just kind of screams smokes and mirrors to me. Now, listen, maybe 6 new faces here that we've not seen before. I will count, Gonzalez, Montaño, Carrillo, Garcia. Maybe if you want to count Memo Martinez, who was in the last call-up, the last friendly call-up, but he's 29 years old, so how much of a generational shift is there? 17 of these guys, by the way, were in the national team when they played in the Nations League semifinal and final versus the United States men's national team. 17 of those guys on this list were on that same team. So essentially, it's the same team. Think about this for a second. How many of those 6 names that I just mentioned, the new faces that are young, but new faces, will make the cut if it's 23 men or 26 men in the Copa America? How many of them will really be there? I doubt too many. 25 of the players on this 35-man list, by the way, have already had experience in some way, shape, or form with the national team, be it Juego Molero, be it Nations League, be it Copa Oro. They've been there. So how much of a generational shift are we really getting? I mean, I understand there are going to be maybe 3 positions up for grab: the goalkeeper, the left winger, and the 9. But when you think about it, Seb, that's pretty much it. There are a few positions up for grab, but there is no generational change like the rest of the world does a generational change. This is smoke and mirrors for me.
You're focused on the new faces, and I'm with you that I don't know who of those new faces is really going to have a major impact. But I do think it's significant when you talk about the names that are leaving and the positions that are leaving. To move on from a Henry Martin is something significant. To move on from a Memo Ochoa is something really significant. To move on even from Chucky Lozano, that's major for the Mexican national team. There's quite a bit of There's a lot that's problematic about this, even if in a vacuum we say that this is something the Mexican team needs. One, Herc, is the reports out of Mexico that the Federation is kind of at this point allowing Jimmy Lozano to do this, right? Which is business as usual down in Mexico, but just begs the question, if you can't trust the manager to call up the right guys, you've hired the wrong guy. And I think that's probably what we're really getting to with the Mexican national team. But in terms of the timing of this generational shift, you know what you need to do a generational shift? You need talent. You need young talent. If there was ever a time in Mexican soccer where I'm looking around and saying, hey, Mexican soccer does not right now have the young talent for a generational shift, it is today. Think about when the U.S. did their generational shift 4 or 5 years ago. They had the best young generation we'd ever seen for the Americans. Mexico is nowhere close to that. It's the worst generation of young Mexican talent if we go off where they're playing and kind of the ceilings where we project these guys to. Beyond that, Herc, we're months away, a month away from a major tournament. You don't do a generational shift months before a major tournament. You're calling in 12 players with 3 caps or less. This, to me, smokescreen or not, is the Mexican Federation saying Copa America doesn't matter. And they've doubled down on that because the sporting director, Duilio Davino, says no matter what happens, we're sticking with Jimmy Lozano. So if we're a Mexico fan, Don't have high hopes for Copa America, because this generational shift at this time, without the generation that's talented enough to step in and take these spots, it's going to be ugly. All right.